Hello and welcome to the Pro Football Network Miami Dolphins Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Infante, joined as always by Adam H. Beasley. And Adam, the Dolphins had a fantastic holiday weekend in New Jersey. But before we get into that, how was your holiday weekend?
Oh, it was great. I love those Friday games. It's, you work a little bit on Thanksgiving, you work a lot on Friday, a little bit on Saturday, and then I could actually watch some football on Sunday, which is a nice change of pace.
Did you get in any shopping at all?
Went to Sawgrass Mills on Saturday, home of the defending Eastern Conference champion Florida Panthers. Some good value out there, although you do see the worst of humanity Thanksgiving weekend at a mega mall. So,
that's why you should have went to the PFN merchandise store, which is now open just in time for the holiday season. You can visit pfnmerch.com for exclusive shirts, sweaters, hats, and more for the football fans in your life. That includes some Miami Dolphins themed shirts as well. And yes, of course, there is a Tua themed shirt. It's an awesome shirt, I think. So pfnmerch.com. Adam, you could have went there, save yourself some trouble of dealing with the crowds and the crazies on the holiday weekend.
I got to say, that was fantastic. I had no idea where you were going with that. And it was just boom. Here's the promo.
Thank you. Thank you. But let's talk about the Jets. Or you know what? Let's talk about what the Dolphins did to the Jets. They got to 8-3, right, for the first time since, last year. And then we won't talk about what happened last year after they went 8-3. This year should be different. They dismantled the Jets. Despite some sloppy play, they still managed to put a 21-point, victory on the board in a game that I admit I was wrong. I said I was more worried about, playing Tim Boyle than I would have been Zach Wilson. And I was horribly, dreadfully wrong. And Adam, you were right there. Is there a takeaway from this game beyond the fact that the Dolphins can beat a bad team even if they make a lot of mistakes?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think we're plumbing the depths of how bad the Jets are at this point. And it looks like the defense has kind of quit. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but the way that they were able to manhandle them in the second half on the ground was really impressive. It was really impressive. I think they had, even after their offensive line just totally went bonkers, right? Because they finished the game with Connor Williams as the only starter on the field. Austin Jackson got kicked out. Teron Armstead, unfortunately, got hurt again. Quadriceps, we'll get into that in a sec. And they were already without their top two guards. So it was a total mix and match. And they still ran for like 10 yards a carry in the fourth quarter when the Jets were just waving the white flag. So interesting to see who takes what kind of blame in New York after this just complete another debacle of a season for them. Huge Super Bowl hopes going into the year. And, of course, losing Aaron Rodgers 3 snaps in or whatever it is the season is going to hurt any team. But I think they could have survived it a lot better than they did. Play good defense, run the ball, have a competent quarterback as your backup. There's going to be, I think, a reckoning for some people in New York. I know that makes you really sad inside to hear that, Matt. Huge Jets partisan we've got on this call.
Yeah, you know me.
But I do think that the Dolphins, by doing what they had to do, very encouraging, very, very encouraging that they were able to run the ball that way. And maybe, just maybe, they're a little bit more physical than we thought.
Yeah, and it seemed like after the boneheaded interceptions, we'll call them late in the second half, that McDaniel, late in the first half. In the second half, they did lean more on the run. Is that just because the game was also getting out of hand? Do you think there's something to, McDaniel was backing off a little bit to let Tua get a breather after those 2 bad interceptions? Is there anything to read into that?
Well, I hope it shouldn't have to come to that, right? I would hope that if they have the ability, like this is a team that, I mean, even as recently as I think as 2-3 weeks ago, was still the number 1 team in the league in rush offense. I know he's got Tyreek Hill. I know he's got Jaelen Waddle. And I know the more efficient play is always to throw the ball, but you have to have that balance and that physicality. You have to make teams respect the play action. The Commanders will not be a problem, by the way. That team is worse than the Jets, I think. Certainly way worse on defense. Like way worse on defense. That's a horrendously bad team on defense right now. Montez Sweat and Chase Young both gone. It's just the bottom's fallen out. We could talk about that in a bit. So it's not like, and to me, the unfortunate thing is, Matt, is I think they're playing pretty well right now, and you don't have a chance to really prove it because you're not going to get any more credit for a 3-score win than you are than a 7-point win over the Jets. You're just not. It's like the Dolphins checked a box, they took care of the Jets and move on. I think that's unfair to how well they're playing right now, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And I think you've got some stats to back that up.
Yeah, so let's talk about the defense, and then we can swing it back around to the offense. Really, I mean, and the Jaelen Phillips injury is a concern, obviously. We'll talk about that and what that means for the players behind him now. But really, I mean, since week 5, so the Dolphins communications team put out some great stats on Twitter that they are first in total defense since week 5, first in yards per play allowed. They are second in rush defense. They are second in third down defense. There's all kinds of stats. I wanted to look back
first in points. Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, first in points too.
Yes, first in points allowed. But I wanted to go back to since week 2. So you take away that Charger game, and they're third in yards per play allowed, fifth in total defense, and they are, if you want to go, advanced metrics, EPA per play, they are 6th in the NFL since week 2. So you take away that Charger game. This defense has been outstanding really since then, and it's kicked it up a notch since Jalen Ramsey came back.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of things. Certainly having arguably the best cornerback in football on your team is going to have a massive, massive difference. I think he's been targeted 16 times in 4 games. He's given up 5 completions. I believe his passer rating against is below 5, not below 50, below 5. Really, 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 really good. But I don't think you can discount how well everyone else in that secondary is playing as well. We saw the Hail Mary out of the Jets, the Javon Holland pick 6, 99 yards, which kind of was just a great snapshot of the entire Jets debacle of a season. Deshaun Elliott's been good, man. I mean, we don't talk about him at all. He's been good. Kader Kohu, once they moved him back to the place where he should be, which is playing the slot, really, really, really good. And the thing about Xavier Howard is he's like, have you even noticed Xavier Howard? Not saying in a bad way, but have you even I forget that he's on the field half the time. Well, certainly the Jets didn't throw the ball. So that game was, obviously. But haven't had the game-changing plays from X that you'd expect. I know I thought he'd have a big interception season, and he hasn't. But he's been more than solid. Like his metrics are very, very good. And you put it all together with the pass rush that, yes, it'll be diminished some without Jaelen Phillips, but I don't think there's going to be some huge drop off there, Matt. I don't think it's like they're going to suddenly forget how to rush the passer. He was, he was probably their most versatile guy in the front 7, but he wasn't their best pass rusher in the front 7. And so I think you can fill that hole. Certainly AVG is a versatile guy as well, so he can give you some of those things that Phillips did in the non-pass rushing side. And wow, what a script this could be for Emmanuel Ogbah, who is totally a forgotten guy for the first 10 weeks of the season. And now he is going to play an enormously important role down the stretch for a championship level defense. Could not draw it up any better for him.
Yeah, when I was watching the Jet game and Phillips goes down, had a chance to digest it, my immediate thought was, well, here comes the Emmanuel Ogbah redemption tour here. He really wants to make a statement. He can do so. And like you said, Ogbah, I think you wrote an article for this on Pro Football Network. He's played in about 21% of the snaps, and he's still tied for 5th in the team with 4 sacks and 10 pressures, which is impressive. I went back to look at his numbers in Pro Football Reference since they started tracking just pressures, and that was 2018. And it's actually Ogbah who has the 2 best single season pressure numbers amongst Dolphins, right? He had 39 in 2021. He had 36 in 2020. The next closest are Phillips, who had 36 as well in 2022. And then Cam Wake had 33. So Ogbah has, yeah. Agba has performed when he had the chance, and he had some injury issues and kind of lost the job. When they traded for Bradley Chubb, kind of sealed the deal with him and Phillips taking over the starting role. But how much of a drop off in the pass rush is there going to be? Could be negligible, right?
Yeah, and here's the thing: is that I hate playing Monday morning quarterback with injuries, certainly, and I think that MetLife turf had an enormous role in what we saw there. But would the Dolphins been better served all along rotating their guys a little bit more? I mean, Phillips fantastic shape. It's not like he got hurt because of conditioning. I mean, he is an Adonis. Like, he is chiseled. And so it's not, I'm not blaming the strength staff. I'm not blaming the training staff. I'm not blaming the coaching staff. I'm just curious as to if maybe that there was some wear and tear there with that injury, and the turf just was the thing that made it go, or it was just totally an act of God. Nothing could have helped that. But it is bizarre that not only a guy who's making $15 million in base salary this year, he has the number one cap figure. Think about that. Emmanuel Ogbah is the number one cap figure on this roster, which is insane because you think of all the stars they have on this roster. It's not like, this is a bad team. This is a team that is loaded with superstars. Clearly, those numbers for all those superstars are going to go through the roof next year, Tua Tagovailoa included. But it is the most bizarre asset allocation I can think of, where a team that they're on Hard Knocks for a reason, right? They have all these stars, they have all these influencers, and Agba, who can't see the field for the first 2.5 months of the season, is the guy who's making the most. It's really crazy.
Yeah, and boy, what a story for Hard Knocks to document here if Agba becomes a key piece and makes key plays down the stretch here in this run. That would be a fun storyline, almost as if it's scripted, right, Adam? As some might say.
So I'm pretty sure Jaelen Phillips doesn't think it was scripted.
No. When he got the script and read that part, he couldn't have been happy, right? But let me ask. So we talked about the defense. Are you more concerned during this stretch run about defense or some element of the offense?
Well, let's see. I mean, I think the offense is playing on a down in, down out basis almost as well as they did at the start of the season. I think their metrics are pretty good. The one thing we've talked about this, I believe, multiple times is the explosive plays. That's what's missing. And maybe Achane coming back this week will help. Maybe, Tyreek getting a little healthy, which, by the way, I mean, he's those nicks and bruises and bumps and all that are starting to add up with him now. He's had, I think, 3 times in 5 weeks now, some sort of injury, hip, was it hand, and then ankle. And I think that hand injury is the reason he dropped that touchdown. I think he's having trouble clutching the ball. And I believe he admitted that to the Amazon Prime broadcast team. But these teams are playing, too high shell. They're just not going to let Tyreek and Waddle run free. And if it does happen, like in the Broncos game, it's just total bust, and maybe that happens this week because the Commanders are so inept, but you play the best teams and you're not going to have the run free touchdowns that you've seen, certainly where they build up that resume that made them in the conversation for the best offense of all time. Teams are no longer allowing them to do that. So that is, a concern, but I'd be more concerned if they haven't shown the ability. Tua hasn't shown the ability, aside from those 2 boneheaded mistakes he makes every single week. Sometimes they get intercepted, sometimes they don't, but every week he throws 2 balls that could get picked. Other than that, he's phenomenal. He is absolutely phenomenal in diagnosing the defense, reacting, putting the ball where it should be on time in a way that his receivers can make a play, not just catch the ball and fall on their butts. Run the football, man. And I think we should spend a little bit of time about talking about this, not just the 3rd and 4th and short, but more broadly. They had, I don't want to impugn these guys, but they had a backup offensive line, I think is the way to put it. A backup offensive line moving a Jets front this past week. And they had Jeff Wilson, who has a success rate, I think I looked it up, what was it, 56% maybe, somewhere in that neighborhood. Fantastic. And he had a big rushing day against the Jets without any home runs. And that to me it's a signal of a team that can play physical, that can get you 4 or 5, 6 yards every time they line up and hand the ball off. You do that enough, and you're not going to see those too high shells because teams like, yeah, they don't want to get beat deep, but it's I think it's worse. It's demoralizing to give up these 12 play, 85-yard drives that take 7 minutes off the clock, and your defense is just banged up afterwards because they got sat on. So I am going to get on the table now, Matthew, and advocate more Jeff Wilson. Show us Jeff Wilson. Even if Devon Achane comes back this week, which I think there's a real chance he does, you need to get him 5, 8, 10 carries every single game, change of pace, physicality. And they absolutely should lean on him as their short yardage back because he is the best of what they have at that skill. And he's good at it. He is good at picking up. Like they ran the ball, I think, on 3rd and 2, and he got 4 or 5 yards, right? And you've got some stats that kind of suggest that the Dolphins don't run the ball nearly enough in those situations. I would agree. I think that they have the ability to do it. They have a back in Jeff Wilson who can get those tough yards. And I think it's time just to do it.
Yeah, we talk about the short yardage stuff. It's obviously been talked about a lot, on Twitter amongst Dolphin fans, and I think a little bit in the broadcast as well. So I wanted to look at what they've done actually in short yardage, right? So how did I define short yardage? If it was 3rd or 4th down with 2 or less to go, okay, and that includes if they're down around the goal line. And they've ran 7 rushing plays on 3rd or 4th and 2 or less. If you discount 2 plays that were aborted because of bad snaps. So take those aside, that's a whole nother issue, right? Just having a clean operation. But 7 rushing plays on 3rd or 4th down and 2 or less to go, they converted 4 of them for a first down or a touchdown. So, not bad by any means. 2 of those 3 failures were back-to-back plays against the Broncos. They were Alec Ingold runs on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, and they were short both times. Take those away, all of a sudden you are, out of the 7 rushing plays, they converted – out of 5 rushing plays, they converted 4 of them, right? If you take away the 2 fullback runs.
You're taking away a lot of things that.
No, I know. Okay.
They're
I
failing
to
at this.
This is more about then I wanted to see how often they actually ran in those situations. So I went back to week 5. It seemed like a logical place because they've only run the ball 2 times in these situations since week 5. Once against the Panthers, once against the Jets. They converted both. It was a touchdown for Carolina. It was the Jeff Wilson run against the Jets, just, that you just noted. They also, during that time, threw 12 pass attempts on 3rd or 4th and 2 or fewer to go. Okay, 12 pass attempts, only converted 6 of them. The balance just doesn't, there's nothing there that tells me that they should lack confidence in the ability to get a yard or 2 in those situations. And yet McDaniel, it seems like, and I said it on Twitter, I think others have said it, does he overthink some of these play calls sometimes? And I hate to question him because he knows more, than I could ever dream of knowing. But that's a big imbalance in week 5 where you have 12 pass attempts versus 2 rush attempts in short yardage situations.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I'd be curious to see, and I don't have the data in front of me, how that matches up with the league average. I think a lot of teams run or throw the ball in 3rd and 4th and short. I think they do because they think it gives them a better chance to pick it up. I would agree that they have the capability to do it. Again, Jeff Wilson, 4.7 yards per carry, long of 14, tells me that he, between the tackles, can get you those tough yards. But I will say this. I know Mike pretty well at this point. This is almost 2 full seasons now. He's got an edge, but he doesn't have an ego, if that's a way to put it, right? And a lot of times coaches will look at the data and say, no, I know better. I don't know if Mike's that guy, right? And I wonder if he is seeing something that we're not in practice, has a feel for his personnel in a way that we don't, that gives him pause in those situations. Now, those concerns, I think you and I might agree, it might be overblown, but we also have to concede that he has all the information and we have just a fraction of it. And so why, and it'd be interesting to sit down and ask him at length, why do you trust the pass more than the run there? And I'm sure his answer is going to be because I have Tua and Tyreek and Waddle. Like that's going to be his answer. And if I need a play, I'm going to go to the guys I know who can make plays. Doesn't explain why they threw into traffic to Durham Smythe on what was a 3rd and short in the first half. But and again, that ball hit Tyreek in the hands, right? Like that's a touchdown. Yes, it goes down as a failed pass. It wasn't because of the quarterback. It wasn't because of the play call. Both those things worked. It was the receiver just dropped the ball. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I do know this. The Dolphins at this point believe themselves to be a physical team. And I know they heard some of the chatter. Oh, this is a finesse team, all that. I think they've proven, that that's not necessarily true. And I think they kind of have a chip on their shoulder that, no, we can go and get those tough yards. I talked to Alec Ingold. I asked him about this yesterday. I asked him, I was like, this is a team that's known for being explosive, those high flying plays. There are those doubters that say, is this just a finesse team? Are they physical or not? And he said it's speed to power. You see Raheem Mostert basically trucking guys every week, and he's one of the fastest guys in the league. When you're able to, this is the quote, when you're able to make that physical track meet happen, it's important. It takes all 11 to have that physical presence, but when you're going up against good defenses and you have to have 4, 5, 6 yard carries and string those out and stack them, that's another place of improvement where you're able to see the development throughout our offense. So if the big plays aren't happening, you can still rely on those fundamentals and techniques. So long way of saying they think that they are that team and they're getting better at doing it. We'll see if the head coach trusts them in those crucial situations to be that team.
And so if you were Mike McDaniel, let's just put you there in those spots.
I probably wouldn't be living in this house, but it's a nice house, but I probably wouldn't be living here.
Okay. Beyond that, and maybe you wouldn't be stealing dates from your players, which he debunked a little bit there, right? You can read all about it on Pro Football Network. Adam has a piece about Mike's response.
Is that the first time that the term D-bag has appeared in a headline at a PFN story?
Yes, 100%. That's why I went through several levels of approval there to be able to use D-bag in the title. But okay, so you're Mike McDaniel. What would you look? Is Jeff Wilson your remedy initially? Let's give him run. Let's test him in these situations and see if he can do it. And this might be the time, right, against some of these teams in these games that you should win handily, right? Let's admit that to really give him run and prove it out that it can be Jeff Wilson.
Well, and here's the thing: they run a lot of 2 backs, but how much dot do they run? Like, not a ton. Like, I'm trying to remember. I mean, try that. You've got one of the better fullbacks in the league in Alec Ingold, and you have a proven power back in Jeff Wilson. Send the fullback in there and see if you can just pick up the hard yards that way. They're not going to do the tush push. It's very clear that they have no interest in putting Tua Tagovailoa at risk, and they probably don't think it'd be particularly effective. They're not going to do that. We talked a bit last week about maybe using a non-quarterback, Chase Claypool, some of these bigger body tight end / wide receivers they have. Frank Smith doesn't love that idea either because it ups the risk of putting the ball on the ground. Well, you got to do something, right? And so the something should be you go heavy, you go maybe 22, right? 22 package. Tell Alec Ingold to earn his money in the trenches and just punch somebody in the teeth and get the tough yard that way. It's not pretty, it's not flashy, but it's effective. Try that. And then when you do that consistently, Matt, run play action, right? And you leak out your tight end. You don't need to go 30, 40 yards downfield, but you leak out your tight end. The teams have to trust that and fear that running potential. And if your tendencies are pass, play action's a little bit less effective. So yeah, I agree with you. I think they're going to absolutely hammer the Commanders, hammer them this weekend for reasons we can get into in a second. But if they do get into that short yardage situation, don't be afraid to prove that you have that physicality.
Right. And this isn't to put down what they did against the Jets on third down in general, right? I mean, Mike McDaniel had said that was probably Tua's best third down game, except for a throw, because one of his interceptions was a third down. Other than that, he was 10 of 12 for 160 yards, converted 9 of 14 dropbacks for first downs, 5 plays of 15 plus yards on third down. So we're not saying that, but when you get down into these situations where your goal to go, for example, and that has been a bugaboo, and we've talked about this on the podcast, where goal to go, they can stand to improve. They're good in the red zone, but they're a little bit less good, if that's a word, inside the 10. And maybe this is another area where Jeff Wilson can help them. Well, although Mostert's been fine too, and maybe it's a commitment to the run. I'm not sure. But you talked about the Commanders and how the Dolphins should blow them out of the water. I want to ask, big picture, beyond just the Commanders. A couple weeks ago, we talked about how winning 5 in a row, right? You get to 11-3 heading into the Christmas Eve game against the Cowboys, and how mathematically just winning 5 games in a row in this league is tough, right? It's just not an easy thing to do, even if you're playing a bunch of cupcakes. And they're 40% of the way there now, with Washington, Tennessee, and the Jets again.
Are you taking a victory lap on me already with 3 games to go?
I'm asking if you're confident. Have you changed your mindset? I mean, 11-3 heading into Christmas Eve seems more likely now than it ever has. The Jet game was the one, right or wrong, that I was more nervous about than anything, regardless of who's quarterback, because divisional game, short week, on the road, all of that stuff. Just, the Jets in general, sometimes they win games that shouldn't against the Dolphins. And, the Dolphins put that to rest pretty quickly. So how do you feel about these next 3 in general?
I think when I said that, I overestimated the quality of the opponents, right? I think every single game, well, it's up to 9.5 now this week on the road. Yeah. It was double digits last week on the road. Tennessee's going to be double digits at home. New York's going to be double digits at home. I mean, has there ever been a stretch where they've been double-digit favorites for 5 consecutive weeks? That is mind-boggling. I mean, it's really hard to be 2-score favorites in the National Football League. It's really, really hard. And they're probably going to do it. I haven't seen, again, the latest number for the Commanders, but it's going to be close. It's going to be 9.5, 10 points probably when it's all said and done. So, I think if I failed anywhere, it was overestimating the Jets, because I thought they would have put up a lot more of a fight than they did in that game. But yeah, no, I think at this point, anything but 11-3 is a disappointment. Not saying it's a lock, but I think it's certainly more likely than not at this point.
Okay, so then let's talk, AFC playoff picture then real quick.
Can I put all those fun stats together on the Commanders just to dunk on them?
Fine. Okay. Let's dump on the Commanders, and then we can talk big picture. Go ahead.
I spent literally 20 minutes putting this together, and you're just breezing right past it. Okay, just breezing right past it.
Okay, no, go ahead. By all means, let's put a nail in the Commanders' coffin here.
Okay, enjoy. So we can laugh about Sam Howell and the offense all we want, and crazy thing is that these are the 2 top passers in the National Football League in terms of passing yardage. The showdown America's waiting for: Dolphins, Commanders, Tua Tagovailoa versus Sam Howell. Crazy. Is Howell leading the league in passing yards? Is that correct?
I believe
it's either he or it's either him or Tua.
No, he has more than Tua. Yards per game, he's like 5th, because you have some players.
Oh, because they haven't had their bye yet.
Right.
That's how it was. All right, well, fine. Pure passing yards. That's fine, because Tyreek is going to get 2,000 yards fraudulently because of 17 games. I didn't say that.
He might get 2,000 in 16 games, to be fair.
Oh, I don't know, man. You look at him, and over the last...
2,000 to me is not the number for him. For him, it's can he break the Johnson record, which is what, 1906 in 16 games.
Yeah, no, I get that. But the last 6 games, he has been really, really good. He hasn't been the same, though. His yards per catch is like down 6 yards from what it was the first 4 games of the season. A lot of that, as we talked about, are teams just determined not to get beat by him. But I think a lot of it is, some of it also is wear and tear. I mean, he's a guy who's running a marathon every time he goes out there. Now has 3 injuries to monitor. Most targets entering this past weekend in the National Football League. I think after their game on Friday, entering the Sunday games, he had the most targets. Anyway, he's being used a lot. His snap count not in the top 10, but his targets are up there. So I don't think it's a given at this point that he gets 2,000 yards. And I definitely don't think him getting it in 16 games is going to happen unless he goes absolutely bananas against the Commanders, which could happen because they're really bad on defense.
I was just about to say, here's the segue to talk about how bad they are on defense.
Okay, so since the trade deadline, which was Halloween, there have been 4 games. The Commanders have played 4 games. They played the Patriots, the Seahawks, the Giants, and the Cowboys. Of those 4, 1 elite quarterback, 1 pretty good quarterback, 2 dog poop quarterbacks. We can all agree?
Poor Tommy DeVito.
Okay. Well, Tommy DeVito lit their asses up. So,
yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
In those 4 games, they have given up over 1,500 yards, 6.4 yards per play. By way of comparison, about 5.25 is the median number. Like 5.2 is average in the National Football League. The Commanders are giving up 6.4. So that's like 20% more than the league average per play. First downs, 19.8 per game, 5.1 yards per carry against. Here's the fun one. Those quarterbacks who I just mentioned, who I just rattled off, completion percentage isn't great, 63.8%, but I think a lot of that is Mac Jones and Tommy DeVito. But they're averaging 7.8 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception, a passer rating of 107, which I think that's the league lead. I think the league leading quarterback in the National Football League is somewhere around there. They do have 10 sacks in those 4 games, but here's something fun. 9 of them came against the Giants. So they play a real offensive line. They have 1 sack in 3 games. Their EPA on defense, 29th. On dropback, 26th. On rush, 28th. The last line of the note I sent to you was Dolphins might score 80. Probably not 80, but
no, you know what? They won't, because Mike McDaniel will call off the dogs, as we've seen.
Yeah. It's going to be ugly.
It's going to be ugly. I want to point out one. Am I allowed to point out one positive stat for the Commanders? Because it's interesting. It kind of goes to what we just talked about earlier about the Dolphins. They are 12th in the NFL in goal to go defense and allowing a touchdown. And we talk about how the Dolphins in goal to go are not, they're right around league average. I think 15th the last I looked. So
is that on the season?
Yeah, that's for the season.
Yeah. So I mean, we don't know the last 4 weeks.
No, I can't. I couldn't break that down by 4 weeks. Correct. The Dolphins
okay.
are 14.
All right, so they're gonna have to score 80-yard touchdown passes then.
Right. Well, and we'll get Hill right back on track, and maybe Tua gets back on track for MVP. After a 6 touchdown, 500-yard performance coming up.
Yeah, his numbers over the last month have not been certainly where they were earlier in the season, but they haven't been super impressive, largely because of the turnovers. Like the picks, and then he's had at least 1 fumble, maybe multiple over the last month. Those interceptions not only bring down your passer rating, but they take away potential touchdowns too. So that, to me, at this point, penalties, again, unless they're playing the Eagles, the Bills, or the Chiefs, they don't really commit that many penalties. But they do turn the ball over at a rate that is alarming, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're I was just looking at it. I believe 5th in the league. Yep. 6th in the league in how many the percentage of drives that end in a turnover. So they were outside the top 10 heading into this game. They are now 6th.
You said it was like 14% last week. That number is probably going up.
15.2 now. 15.2% of their drives end in a turnover.
That's bananas to me, man. That is usually a team that's thinking about drafting a quarterback in the top 5 because they're a really bad football team.
There's only one good team above them, and that's the Chiefs, by the way. The Chiefs are at 16%. They are 5th.
There are a lot of similarities between those 2 teams. How they're constructed, the innovative offensive mind who as the head coach, their propensity of doing dumb bleep. There are some similarities, except for the Lombardi trophies.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the Commanders are right behind the Dolphins at 7th. So 14.9% of their drives and then a turnover. I expect that may increase this weekend.
What was your you had an AFC East question or a broader picture question?
No, I wanted to ask. Dolphins get to 11-3. Let's say.
Wow, already just writing off 3 more wins.
I am because it's more fun to talk about this. How many more wins do you think they need to get? Is the 1 seat still in play?
Oh, 100%.
Maybe, right?
Yeah.
There's tiebreaker issues. But does 12 wins get it? Do you need to get the 13 wins for the one? Probably.
Oh yeah. Well, because it depends. Is one of their 12 wins against the Ravens?
It will. They'll have to win that. If they lose that game, they really can't get the 1 seed unless between now and then the Ravens lose to the Niners and Jaguars.
Or that's the Dolphins' only loss. Like,
Or that's the Dolphins'
yeah,
only
yeah.
loss.
What are they right now? They're 8-3. So if they
Yeah.
finish 13-4, I'd say there's a really good chance they get the 1 seed.
The concern with that would be the Jaguars don't have a hard schedule anymore left. Outside of the Ravens, it's not a good. I mean, the Browns were supposed to be good, and now with their quarterback.
We're going to go back to the conversation that we just had. It's really, really hard just to say, okay, 6 wins to finish the season for the Jaguars. I mean, they're going to have slip ups. They are.
And then the Chiefs, though. The Chiefs is the other one because they have the tiebreaker. And outside of the Bills, you want to hear the Chiefs' remaining opponents?
Oh, I can't wait.
Patriots, Chargers, Raiders, Packers, and Burrowless Bengals.
Oh, that's not good. Yeah, I mean, if there's a team that can rattle off 10 straight wins, it's the Chiefs. Because that defense is so good, man. That defense travels. It's really, really good. And you have to think at some point, though, although they keep losing wide receivers, right? Yeah, Hardman going IR, is that right? What's that?
It doesn't seem to matter, though.
Well, I know it does. It does matter. Like if their defense wasn't playing out of their skulls, this would be a mediocre football team because Kelsey is diminished, and those wide receivers are bad, like bad.
Yeah,
so
they are. We saw that.
I think like it's crazy, but it could be the Dolphins and Chiefs defenses could carry them to the AFC Championship game. Which you'd say that before the season, although we thought the Dolphins defense was going to be good, we just didn't think it was going to start out as bad as they did. So say that in week 2 or 3, you'd be like, oh, you're nuts. But I think the 1 seed's definitely in play for them. They got to get to 11-3, 100%. What I wanted to ask you about, and we'll get out of here on this, what if it's Dolphins Bills week 18, Dolphins Bills week 19?
I don't. So I've gotten blasted for this by our CCO, David Behrman, because he wants to write off the Bills as done. I refuse to believe it because I've seen what the Bills can do when they're not turning the ball over, if they can just get out of their own way. And I want no part of the Bills in the first round. I want no part.
You look at the EPA per play, that website has the tiers. And what they do is they have the XY axis where you are on offense, where you're on defense, and then they do the diagonal lines to show you the tiers. And the Bills are tier 2, and the Dolphins are tier 2, right? So on a down and out basis, that team is still really, really good. They just make the mistakes the Dolphins make, but worse. I mean, I think that's largely the difference. They're diminished on defense, but I mean, was that a terrible defensive game against the Eagles? I don't think so. The first half the Eagles were clueless, right?
Yeah.
So I think it wasn't a great defensive game, but it wasn't a terrible one. I'm with you. I would much rather see, clearly the Colts or Texans or insert mediocre team here. Any AFC North team aside from the Ravens would much prefer to see them. It would be so Dolphin to get this 2 seed. And the Bills be the 7. It would, there would be some nervous days in the lead up to that playoff game.
Yeah, and let me add, if there's a scenario out there where the Dolphins are playing for nothing in week 18, they've their seed is locked in, they're a 2, they're whatever it may be, 2 or 3, and the Bills have to win and get in, I would 100% play, everyone the hardest to keep the Bills from even getting in.
Well, not just getting in. If you know that if you beat them, you won't see them.
Right.
That's even I mean, certainly if the the Dolphins are the 2 seed and the Bills get in if the Dolphins are the 3 seed, the Bills get in the 7. The only place you would see them is the AFC Championship game. I think all of us would say, oh, all right, you lose to the Bills in the AFC Championship game, it's still a pretty good season, right? But what you absolutely do not want to do is to see them in the wild card round. So if it's a scenario where you can get a much better opponent in the wild card round by beating them, you do it. You absolutely do it.
Yep. Okay. And then let's wrap it up, Adam. How many do the Dolphins win by? On Sunday versus the Commanders.
What's the biggest number?
Okay. Will they beat them by more or less than 50?
Less than 50.
But, you know, by the way, that the Bronco win looks really good all of a sudden, doesn't it? People were poo-pooing it.
Not even a joke. It's the best win of the season. Yeah. In the National Football League, it's the best win of the season. And let's get out of here on this. Everyone's on Twitter is like, oh, it was a different Broncos team then. Was it? I mean, they started 0-2. Those first two games they lost, I think, were by combined 4 points or something, right? It's certainly a better team, but it's not a different team, right? I would love to see that rematch. You imagine the 2-7 matchup would be Dolphins Broncos.
Yeah, would it make you a little uneasy? You know, the whole revenge thing? No,
because the Broncos are still probably a tier 3, if not tier 4 team in the National Football League.
Yeah. Okay, so Dolphins win by what, 20? Give me a number, Adam. Higher.
I would say 24 plus. I think we're looking at like 38-10, something like that.
Okay. All right. I agree. I don't think I would say somewhere. I mean, they'll cover. I think 13-14 probably feels right.
Well, yeah, they could call off the dogs, and Commanders could get a late garbage touchdown to make it look interesting. But there will not be a point on Sunday where you think the Dolphins might lose the game.
Okay.
Like it'll be very similar to that Panthers game. They go down 14-0. The Dolphins are still going to win the game.
So you won't be nervous at all. Let's say that first quarter unfolds just like it did against Carolina. Are you nervous, or you're like, nah, they'll come back?
Is Tua healthy?
Yes.
Not nervous.
Okay.
Just because the Commanders are unspeakably bad on defense, like really, really bad on defense right now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, be sure to check out profootballnetwork.com/Miami-Dolphins for all the coverage of this game and all the other games after it moving forward. Be sure to check out PFNmerch.com for all of your holiday shopping for your, the football fans in your life. Be sure to subscribe to the pod if you haven't already. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, like it, and all that. And we will see you back here next time on the Pro Football Network Miami Dolphins Podcast.